For more chat about geek entertainment, answers to your questions, and news from the wider world of Christian geekery, get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services. Well, my editing skills are crap, but can the same thing be said about episode 1 of season 1 of The Irregulars on Netflix? Stick around and find out. Oh crap, I didn't even think about what music I was gonna... La 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 la. I think that's Tales from the Crypt, right? That's just the first thing that came to mind for a spooky supernatural show. Hey, I'm Peter Franson from christiangeekcentral.com and Spirit Blade Productions. This is my uncut review for episode 1 of The Irregulars on Netflix. The synopsis on IMDb for the series as a whole reads, set in Victorian London, the series follows a gang of troubled street teens who are manipulated into solving crimes for the sinister Dr. Watson and his mysterious business partner, the elusive Sherlock Holmes. Now, in the first episode, we only see Watson, we don't see Holmes, and I feel like they're giving something away a little bit by calling him sinister. He certainly comes across to me like a jerk, but I wouldn't have used the word sinister necessarily. Maybe by the end there's a hint of something sinister, but still I would just read him mostly as, well, this guy's kind of a jerk. Yeah, I don't know what their plans are for him or for Holmes. I think we saw maybe Holmes' foot in this first episode, but we'll see. That the focus is definitely not on them. Watson is more of like a plot device, a mechanism for the most part, to give the troubled street teens something to do. They are basically needed by Watson to solve cases that have a supernatural bent to them that the police don't know what to do with or don't believe in or whatever. So and he needs the Irregulars, just like I'm not like a Sherlock Holmes fan, but I think it was the Baker Street Regulars that are part of like the Sherlock Holmes mythos, that were policemen or something that would go out and they would beat the pavement basically and collect clues and information for Holmes and Watson. Well, The Irregulars, as this series is called, features these teens who are willing to go out and get information and in some ways help solve the crimes of these supernatural cases that for one reason or another Watson, I guess, is going to be dealing with. It feels like, as far as the scripts, the pacing, the tone, the story, all that stuff, just a basic description of this animal, feels like a co-production between the BBC and the CW. And I don't mean that as a compliment. I have nothing against people who enjoy CW shows, but they are almost never for me because of the general tone that they have. So this is produced with modern sensibilities. It's Victorian London, but it has pop music that it uses frequently throughout the score. It has a diverse ethnic casting that would clash with the period and the location and how certain characters are cast. For example, Watson is played by an African-American actor, and there's no statement being made like in terms of like that would be highly unusual in that time and place for a black man to have that kind of role, but it's not commented on at all. And so it's being, they're playing around with almost, I don't know if it's necessarily they're going for alternate history or they're just basically saying, hey, this is a show about supernatural stuff, so we'll just do what we want, and it's more of a stylistic choice. That's what it seems to be the case, rather than it being alternate history and them really taking the timeline serious and stuff like that. So it's not a big distraction to me because I just see it as a stylistic choice. There's a focus on these, well, they're called teens in the description. I assumed they were 20-somethings. That's probably how old the actors are, maybe very late teens or early 20-somethings that just kind of look a little younger. And they're being undervalued by those older and wealthier than them in general. There are sexual tensions that are a consistent element between characters. I can see at least one love triangle being set up. But there's it's the kind of show where these sexual tensions are showing up even in unrealistic situations, such as life-threatening circumstances. And like, really? Right now, with what crazy stuff just happened that was not only life-threatening but freaky supernatural, you're going to take a moment and share a tense sexual glance or romantic glance with somebody, lock gaze with somebody. I'm like, really? Now's the moment for that? It doesn't work for me. And so it throws out even what I would call kind of faux psychological realism in favor of leaning into these elements that are really common for young adult stories, and CW shows, and shows focusing on teens and stuff, because teenagers, those kinds of things of romantic, or I should really say much more often sexual tensions, or crush type feelings, those are really powerful during that time period, in the teens and early 20s and stuff like that. And so I think for a teen viewer, it's not going to feel weird, it's not going to feel out of place. I should say that even when I was a teen and a 20-something, I didn't like that kind of stuff. So I think that but I think for the average teenager, they're not going to be distracted maybe by those kinds of things. Let's see here. The characters do have differing motives, but they all felt pretty simplistic to me and somewhat one note in who they were. Now, that may be because, it's early days and actors, sometimes it takes a while. It takes a whole season in some cases for actors to really get a sense of their characters and settle into subtlety and nuance. But again, I think the general tone of the show feels like a CW show that's not going to be settling into subtlety and nuance with how these characters are written and portrayed. The tone also leans on humor quite a bit, which some may find a nice counterbalance to the dark supernatural situations throughout, but I found that it only kept me from investing in the seriousness of the threats and in the darkness of the world. Let me talk a little bit about performances, just even though I've already touched on them a bit. They all have a slightly overstated, what I would kind of call an actory vibe, actors making choices and stuff like that, rather than characters that I really feel like are people that I might have met before, that I can see layers in, so it's a performance style that's very much like a lot of CW shows. And so if that is not distracting to you or bothersome to you, then I don't think you're going to have the same problems with the performance styles that I did. There are a few brief moments where some actors went more subtle and nuanced, but these were rare exceptions to how I normally felt about the performance styles. As far as the visuals and the general production quality of the visual elements of this pilot, the cinematography in general also feels like standard CW quality. It's not as cheap looking overall compared to CW shows, I would say, but also definitely not the quality of truly premium cinematic looking shows like the best of those on premium streaming services like Netflix, which this one's on, or HBO Max or Amazon Prime. When you think of like, oh man, just like really great television, it has on those streaming services, it has a more cinematic quality to it. There's more visual storytelling going on, as opposed to cameras being just set up and then capturing the actors. The actors say their lines, they do their things with whatever performance they're going to give, and then we move on. So I really prefer, and in my mind, it's kind of the bar to match these days, that artistic and more visual storytelling that we really see in the use of cameras and color composition and stuff like that in the more premium shows, and this just isn't up in that caliber in my view. And I'd also say the same about the quality of the visual effects. They're not glaringly bad, but they're not the quality of the highest quality streaming service shows. Okay, as far as themes, is there anything of moral, philosophical, or spiritual significance going on in the themes of this thing that might trigger some worthwhile thought or conversation? I don't think so. I mean, supernaturally themed shows almost always seem to get around to making some statements or affirmation of moral things or spiritual realities. And if they're supernaturally themed but not truly going for a horror vibe throughout, they're going to be usually leaning in a relativistic type of morality or relativistic view of spiritual realities. We're just kind of, everything is all somehow true at the same time, and we're not going to say anything is false, Whereas in a horror show or movie that's really leaning into the horror elements, you're more likely to get a clear line of like, this is evil, this is good, and I don't sense that. It doesn't seem to be leaning into that heavily enough. It's probably going to play out like the CW show Supernatural, or other similar types of shows that maybe do have horror elements, but they're not truly scary like other shows or especially movies that would be leaning into horror. So there, but I would also say that at this time I don't see them making strong statements about spiritual realities at all. There may be some foundations laid for themes about the underprivileged or social classes, but no themes felt strong or consistent in this pilot. Okay, I have no idea what your tastes are in TV shows, but if I were a time traveler, I'd go back in time and say, Pater. Skip this one, it feels too much like a CW show with a performance style and a tone that you dislike and that keeps you at arm's length from feeling the intended tension or caring about the characters. So this is just not a show for you. It's rated TV, I put 14 here. I think it's actually, or MA, I think it's actually 14. Let me double check. TV 14, and I think that's likely for language, violence, and disturbing elements. All right, those are my thoughts. Would love to get yours in the comments below. Please like, share, subscribe, click that bell to stay connected. I want to thank the Spirit Blade Insiders for making this review possible. You can get info about the benefits of becoming an insider at patreon.com/spiritbladeproductions. I just did actually some massaging of the tiers a little bit in ways that I hope that you guys will enjoy. So anyway, check that out for more info. And then I hope you'll join us soon over at christiangeekcentral.com as we continue to geek out and seek the truth. The Christian Geek Central podcast is the longest-running podcast for Christian geeks with over 600 weekly episodes and counting, featuring audio versions of much of the same content you'll find here, plus exclusive content including weekly news updates from the creators of Christian comics, novels, and video games, debriefing and commentary about what I've been playing, reading, and watching, and my expanded responses to your comments and questions via YouTube, email, or the Christian Geek Central forums. And now, with timestamps, so you can jump straight to the segments you want to hear most. Get the Christian Geek Central podcast today on iTunes and other podcast services, and enjoy one more way you can geek out and seek the truth.